Welcome today from Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's no longer sunny and warm. It is now around 42 degrees. And this is Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down, sponsored by, you got it, Bible Interact. I have with me today Dr. David Graves, PhD. He had received his PhD from Aberdeen University in Scotland. He has the extensive experience overseas in the Holy Land, trips to the Temple Mount, and also to Qumran, which we're going to talk about today. Shiloh, this is just to name a few, and 15 years on the Jordanian side, on the other side of the river, on the Jordanian side at Tal El Hammam. But today, I mentioned we're going to talk about Qumran and his adventures. I can say Dr. Graves' big adventures searching for the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Introducing the book titled Digging Up the Bible, dealing with an introduction and brief history of biblical archaeology. With over 30 books published by ECM, Digging Up the Bible is the first book in the Biblical Archaeology series. Delve into the captivating world of biblical archaeology with this book, Digging Up the Bible, an eye-opening exploration of the history, methods, and incredible discoveries of this fascinating science then and now. The experienced archaeologist Dr. David E. Graves has put together an exciting introduction and brief history of biblical archaeology for undergraduate students. This guide provides an invaluable foundation for the astounding discoveries presented in the companion volumes of the Archaeology of the Old Testament and the companion work The Archaeology of the New Testament, along with other impressive works in the Biblical Archaeology series. The chapters include a brief history of biblical archaeology exploring the fascinating stories of several prominent archaeologists. Dr. Graves delves into a captivating exploration of dating and chronology as developed by renowned archaeologist Sir Flinders Petrie, the father of modern Egyptology. Uncover several of the surprising misconceptions about what an archaeological site is really about and the unique characteristics of archaeology. And understand why archaeologists have such a preoccupation with squares. Dr. Graves then launches you on an exhilarating journey of discovery, exploring the fascinating process of archaeological methods over the centuries. Each archaeological site has its own unique identity and requires a tailored approach, but there are core techniques used in the majority of excavations. This incredible book will take you on a journey into the captivating world of biblical archaeology, accompanied by stunning visuals including 50+ vivid color photographs, intricate maps, and thoughtfully crafted charts. It also includes a glossary defining technical archaeological terms, as well as extensive footnotes and bibliography for future study. This accessible resource, intended for laypeople who want to know more about biblical archaeology, is suitable whether you are in a seminary course, a college student, doing a church group, or just for your own personal study. All our books are listed on our website smyrnaean.blogspot.com and can be found on amazon.com.
Welcome, Dr. David Graves.
Thank you, George. Good to be with you.
All right, so today we're going to give us the lowdown. I mean, this is not just going to be archaeology. What we're going to do is we're going to have a personal experience of what it takes to go on a biblical adventure. Digging up the Bible. I'm going off track just for a second because I actually have two. Let me propose this. The first one that leaves a comment, you also have to give me a way to contact you or either Dr. Davis, and we will send you one of his books absolutely free. Compliments for watching the program. And then when you read it and you're so impressed, you can get the rest of them and then tell your friends. All right, Dr. Graves, we're ready to go.
Thanks, George. Appreciate it. Well, with the Qumran Caves, of course, and the Dead Sea Scrolls, one has to go back probably 50, 60 years to when they were discovered. This was back in 1946 and 1947. A couple of shepherds discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, Muhammad, Ed-Dib, and it was a tribe of the Tamara tribe. And what's interesting is that we had one of the actual Tamara relatives helping us when we did the excavations at K53. This goes back a long way, and I've got some interesting stories to tell about what he told us as we're excavating and digging away. 1947, they find all kinds of scrolls in the caves around the Dead Sea. around the site of Qumran. That's why they're called the Qumran Dead Sea Scrolls. They date, 250 BC to around 68 AD. And there's a lot of different types of documents that were discovered. So recently what happened was the IAA, the Israeli Archaeological Society Institute, they decided to do a survey of all of the caves. And they've come up with, I forget now how many of them, but there's a number of them that were discovered in the region. We were the first team to actually excavate one of the caves that they had identified. So it's called Cave 53. It had been published before we identified and published that it existed in previous documents. But we were the first team ever to excavate a cave from the Dead Sea Scroll region down to bedrock, using scientific methods of putting in squares and documenting everything, and since the 1940s. And this was in 2017. We had a small team, probably around 24 people. And the reason why we had a small team was because it's a small cave just south of Qumran. The photo behind me was taken by me at Cave 53. Our cave looking back to the Qumran Plateau. You can see it here over my shoulder. We had all kinds of folks working with us. I was working with Dr. Rendell Price because I was teaching at Liberty University, archaeology at the time, and I was in charge of the subject matter expert for the online archaeology program, and Dr. Price was the resident scholar at Liberty. So he was teaching the residential archaeology class. And so he contacted me and said that we're going to be doing an excavation this year. Would you like to come along with me? And I said, sure. We had one of the other professors at Liberty, a lady by the name of Eva. She assisted me in my work because my job at the excavation was to do all of the recording of the artifacts. So I was the official registrar of everything they would bring out of the cave and they had discovered. And then we would have to process it, and we would have to list everything, of course, which strata it came from, what locust it was in, and what area in the cave. And we have to determine whether it was an artifact, whether it was a specimen. So all the technical stuff, scientific stuff we had to do.
You just said a word that I'm sure our listeners will probably say, like, is this a small critter? What is a loci? Is that you said a locust, a loci. What is that?
Locust is not a grasshopper. It's actually an area that you identify in a strata. They all have numbers, so we know what area it has come from. So we call that the loci or locus.
I thought you was eating that loci and wild honey like John the Baptist.
Good point. I've never actually thought of that before, but you're right. It could be confusing to people. And then we had another gentleman by the name of Lamar Cooper. He was a pastor from Criswell Baptist Seminary, an elderly gentleman, a little older than me. He and I were the oldest on the digs. We hit it off. He was also assisting me with the processing of all these finds because they were bringing them out fast and furious. We had over 400 in about a 2-week period that we had to process. We have to wrap certain things in, it's called Tyvek. It's what we wrap our houses in here in Canada before we can put the siding on them because it breathes. And so you have to wrap it. This protects it from being contaminated for further research after it goes back to the laboratories. So you have to determine whether it's a bone, whether it's bitumen, which is like tar, whether it's a flint, whether it's jewelry. We found some carnelian, which is a red stone, a seal. We had fabric. So this all has to be processed in a very scientific fashion to be preserved. So that was my job. I had a table outside of the cave where I sat overlooking the Dead Sea. Basically, the photograph behind me is what I had to work with. That was my office every day. Beautiful picture of the Dead Sea. And interestingly enough, when I looked out across the Jordan Valley, I could see the other site that I dug at Tel El Hammam, because it's right across on the other side of the Jordan, to the north end of the Dead Sea. So you can see the north end of the Dead Sea from here, and Tel El Hammam. So it was a perfect spot for me. I could dig in. I dug for 15 years in Jordan on the Jordanian side, and now I'm on the Israeli side, although Qumran is actually in a Palestinian enclave. And we had some Palestinians working with us as well. So Joseph, who was the relative of the Tamara tribe, who originally discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, was working with us back in the 1940s. And here we have one of his relatives.
They would have been boys back then.
Yep. Yeah. And he worked actually in the plateau excavations as well earlier. Dr. Price had done some excavations on the Qumran Plateau. He was the director of the dig down there, and Joseph worked with him. And we had another character, his name's Rick Schuler, and he's a John Denver lookalike and also sings like John Denver and performs all over the United States at conference or theaters. And he's got a tour coming up in Europe and Asia. And he sounds just like John Denver and looks just like him. And for 2 weeks, I'm digging with this guy. I had no idea that he did these concerts. He has the Rocky Mountain High experience, that he's got a tour. I just heard him here last weekend in Canada.
You know, since you're mentioning this gentleman, you mentioned him and talked about him briefly the last interview that I was with you, but it was off camera. And I went on, I think it was Facebook and then online, and I sent him an email to contact me. And if he contacts me, I thought it'd be really interesting. All three of us get together and you guys could have a little reunion, and I could have a really cool program. And who knows, maybe he'll bring his guitar. I did follow through with that, just to let you know.
I just Skyped with John yesterday and had a good conversation with him. I'm sure he and I would love to do that for you. And so I'll line that up for you, George, and I'll get back to you on that.
You know, I really appreciate that. And this is just as a side note. So people, later on, we're going to continue with this, and then we're going to meet the John Denver lookalike. And I went to the webpage, and I thought for a minute that this was like a cardboard cutout of John Denver, and you had like your arm around him like this, like sometimes you go to the movie theater and do, with an action figure. And I was looking, I said, well, this guy really does look like John Denver, the hairstyle, the smile. And we're going to get together. That's going to be a really cool time. So I appreciate
he sings just like him. I mean, he does. He's the most authentic. John Denver's manager approves him and has authenticated his performances. That's how good they are. Now, the other interesting thing about him is that I didn't know he sang. And so I'm digging for 2 weeks, and then we get to the kibbutz one evening just to celebrate the dig. And somebody passes him a guitar and he puts on a performance for us.
Wow. A free concert. What the heck?
And blew me away. I couldn't imagine that, he not only, because I'm thinking all this time, boy, this guy looks like John Denver, especially when he puts his glasses on. He looks identical, spitting image of him. But then he picks up a guitar and starts singing. So that was pretty cool. But the other cool thing is that he went and taught himself Hebrew. And he sings the 23rd Psalm at his concerts in Hebrew.
Maybe he'll do that for us. Maybe.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he'd be glad to.
These are the people that you're meeting at the dig. So it's not just the excavation. It's the people that you run into living life.
One of the other members, Aaron Rutkin, he was on the same team with Randall Price when they climbed Mount Ararat. He's a paramedic helicopter pilot, now retired, I think. He was with us and got to meet him. And there were some students from Liberty University who worked with us. So we had some young people working with us.
How in the world would you even get to Ararat? I mean, we're going off subject, so I got to be careful. I'm just thinking, like, how in the world? Somebody would say, like my son, Johnny, he gets up there 16, 17. He's at a university. Or, hey, the professor wants to take us all to Mount Ararat. They're like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, you got to fly to Istanbul, and then you got to fly to the capital, and then you got to fly out to. We actually drove out to Dugas Bayazat, which is a pretty dangerous area. It took quite a while to get out there. Then you stay at Dugas Bayazat, which is a community, a village just at the foot of Mount Ararat, and that's our base camp. There's one hotel. You have to stay in that, and then everybody climbs and does their business out there. So it's kind of neat to meet another ARC researcher. The students, they're really cool because they had been working, some of them had worked in the museum at Liberty, the Bible Museum there, the Archaeology Museum. We had a couple of husbands and wives that were friends of Dr. Price. And so he sort of handpicked his team, which was really neat. So we were all good friends.
When you're going on these adventures, let's just say, for instance, we're going to get back on the subject of Qumran. What does it cost to go on this adventure at Qumran? And what is the least time I can stay? Let's say I got to go back home and go to work. Do I stay a week? Do I stay 2 weeks? What's usually the agenda?
I won't use Qumran for an example because there's not that's not a typical excavation. That's sort of VIP and reservations only kind of dig. But if you go to a typical archaeological dig, such as Qumran or Shiloh, or not Qumran, but at Tel el-Hammam and Shiloh, there you would go as a volunteer. You'd have to pay your flight over from wherever you live to Israel or Jordan. And then you would have to pay for your hotel for whatever time period you wanted to be there. You can go as a volunteer for 1 week or 2 weeks, or if you go that far, you might as well stay for 2 weeks. And then you get your food at the hotel. They give you, generally that's all kind of included, package deal for your dig cost. So they vary in prices, but you can go online, and there's a lot of them that were available before the war. Now, most of the digs, of course, this year, and all the tours have been canceled pretty much, I think. But that will break eventually, I hope and pray. And tourism will be back to Israel and Jordan eventually. So you get up usually about Shiloh, we get up about 4 o'clock in the morning, have breakfast. You're on the bus, and so that you arrive at the site just as the sun is coming up, because you want to put in a pretty full day until it gets too hot to work. In the Jordan Valley, we work in the wintertime because it's too warm in the summertime to work in the Jordan Valley. So that's why the digs at Qumran and Tel el-Hammam were in the wintertime. This was January that we worked in Qumran, and also at Tel el-Hammam. January, February, because it's so hot down there, and you couldn't work. Up in Shiloh, they do a June excavation, and it's pretty warm by about 2 o'clock. So we usually shut down at 2. So you work from 6 until 2, have a lunch break in the middle of the day. The lunch break actually at Qumran, Joseph, our Palestinian friend, had a little teapot, and he would put a pot of tea on for us, and we'd have a break in the middle of the day, or in the middle of the morning, really. And he would pass that around to us with some mira in it, some spice they put in the tea, the chai, that makes it really flavorful. So that was a treat for us. And then you come back usually to the hotel or to an area where you do pottery washing. So you end up having to wash the pottery that you discovered in your square that day, like scrubbing dishes. I didn't enjoy that part of the day because you got to scrub all the pottery that you discovered that day. And then you put it in a tray and let it dry overnight out in the air somewhere. And then the next day they read the pottery from the day before that you would discover that has dried. And we wash it because we want to make sure there's no markings on it or paintings or patterns. Might be an ostrakhan that has a writing on it that you wouldn't see if it was covered with dirt. So that's why you wash them all. And then you have a pottery reading with the experts will sit around a table, and they'll look at all the pottery that you'd found the day before, and then you'd read it. At Qumran, I simply registered everything and put them in packages, and these were taken off to the lab, so we didn't do pottery reading there. But we did find pottery that was Qumran type terracotta pottery there. We also found some flint, a beautiful flint arrowhead that had been made in the Neolithic period. Just amazing how they did the knapping on this, and they shaped the arrowhead, part of the shaft that would be embedded in a piece of wood. A beautiful point, sharp point on it, still intact. So that was pretty neat to find that.
What does that date to?
Oh, the Neolithic? Oh, that would be before the Bronze Age and Chalcolithic period. So very, very early.
4 millenniums BC, 5 millennium.
Probably 5. I'm an expert in the Roman period, so this goes back to.
No. I'm just saying, like you said Neolithic. So I wanted to give the audience an understanding of how far back it is.
Yeah.
Because your Qumran is Roman period. Now we went all of a sudden to Neolithic. That means somebody's been in those caves quite a while. That's, let's say, 5,000 years BC. Yeah. We're 2000 AD or CE. So you're looking at 7,000 years ago.
Yes.
They were
Yes.
in those caves 5,000 years before Christ.
Yes.
5,000 years. Not
They've been using them for a very, very long time. And
very long time.
we found mats in there, woven mats, pieces of woven mats, and pieces of linen that were used to wrap the scrolls in. So we found the pottery they were stored in. We found the linen they were wrapped in. We found the leather that they were bound with, all in the cave. Then we found a scroll. What's significant here is that we have what we call the smoking gun. Unfortunately, there was nothing written on it. We thought it was parchment at first, but it was tested and it was papyrus. So we have a piece of papyri from the cave that had no writing on it, although with special lighting that may change in the future as they test it and research it. So we have scrolls in the cave. We have Qumran pottery in the cave. We have the linen in the cave. We have the leather in the cave, all pointing to this was used. The people, the Essenes, during the Roman period, when the Romans come through after 70 AD and chasing all the Jews down to Masada, where they encamped for 2 years before the wall was breached and everybody committed suicide. That's a whole other story. But this was one of the caves where they hid those scrolls and kept those scrolls. Some have argued that this is not Cave 12, the Dead Sea Scroll Cave 12, which we've designated as the 12th cave that has Dead Sea Scrolls in it, because it was a blank scroll, and in order for it to be a Dead Sea Scroll, you have to have writing on the scroll. Well, we have the smoking gun, so we have the papyrus, and then Joseph comes to us and says, on the QT, he says, David, he says, I'm pretty sure my relatives cleaned this cave out.
Wow.
So
and you heard it first on this program, folks.
We know there was Qumran Dead Sea scrolls in that cave. We heard it from one of the relatives of the guys that discovered it originally, and they've gone through and they've pulled all the scrolls out of those caves. So I'm comfortable in calling it Cave 12. Others have published a book on this. They have argued that if you find linen in a cave, then you have a Dead Sea Scroll cave. Our discoveries that we made at this cave made the front cover of National Geographic magazine in 2018 on the December issue. And the front cover reads, Bible Hunters, Scholars, Schemers, and the Search for the Ancient Texts.
Is your picture in the National Geographic?
They don't picture us, they picture the scroll that we discovered. So they mentioned Dr. Randall Price, and the Israeli Antiquities Authority representative was a guy by the name of Oren Gutfeld from Hebrew University. So he was the Israeli Antiquities Authority representative from Hebrew University, and then Randall Price, and they've worked together before, the two of them. My name's not mentioned in it, but I was there and recorded all the finds. So some 400 pieces they brought out of the cave to us, and I had to register it all.
It's quite a few little finds in that little cave.
Yes.
And especially to find something that is 5,000 years BC. That's incredible to think that somebody that long ago was in that cave.
And we excavated all the way down to bedrock. So it was the first one that was completely cleaned out. And all of the dirt that was removed was sifted. So we had sifters because we took turns. We didn't have a lot of room in the cave, so a few people would work. Some people would sift the finds, the dirt, to find other fragments. And then they would switch places, and some would work in the caves. They have to have lights, because there's no light in there. They actually had to reinforce the entrance of the cave with wood for security reasons and safety reasons before we could excavate in there. So the IIA went in there and did that, put reinforcements up, because we didn't want the cave collapsing on us as we worked inside of it.
Let's say that I'm a tourist and I go down to Qumran. I know where Qumran at. I know that there might be, because they just found 4 swords, right? 4 swords in a down there by Engedi. I'm on a tourist treasure hunt. No permits. It's just me wandering around, me and maybe some friends wandering around, seeing what we can see in a cave. what would happen? Would I get arrested for that? What
I
what
would bring
what
an
would
over.
happen?
I would bring more than an overnight bag because you're going to be spending a long time in jail.
Really?
You have to have permits. This is actually a national park.
Oh, I didn't know
So,
that.
yeah, this is all part of the a national park region. Wildlife around, a lot of ibex and birds and wildlife in the area, foxes. So they patrol it and manage it pretty closely. So you just can't go exploring these caves on your own. You get arrested for that. There have been other caves. In March of 2021, there was a new discovery in another cave that they excavated further south from us, Nahal Hevar. They found some scroll fragments inside of the cave. They called it the Cave of Horrors because they had a lot of skulls, and the Cave of Letters was Muramat. So they found some fragments in those two caves. They're the first biblical scrolls from the minor prophets discovered in the Judean desert through excavations in more than 60 years. So we were hopeful that we would discover some scrolls in our cave, but we just found the scroll that didn't have anything written on it. But they did find pieces of the minor prophet scrolls that they already had discovered, and they could match them to it. Now, if we could take this piece of parchment we had in our cave, right, and we could identify it with another Dead Sea Scroll, we would be able to identify that that scroll came out of our cave, Cave 12.
I understand, like a great big puzzle.
But they could do carbon testing on it, and they could match the papyrus to the scroll, and then they could link that scroll saying it has come out of Cave 12. So that would be really cool.
So how long was your team there excavating in the cave? 2 weeks?
We were there for about 2 weeks, and then we all went home, and they still did a little bit more work. The IAA with his assistant and Joseph, they did a little bit more work. And that's when the scroll they discovered was found. Randall Price got on a plane and flew right back because he wanted to be there, because we thought we had discovered some more scrolls. Though it didn't last very long, because it didn't take us a long time with the team we had to get down to bedrock. Bedrock, you can't go any further, so then you have to process everything back in the laboratories. And it was all examined by experts in their laboratories in Jerusalem. And
out of the 400 items that you found fragments of pottery.
Yeah.
You found a little arrowhead. Did you find jewelry?
Yes.
What did the jewelry date to? Do you know?
I don't remember. Some little beads. We had some carnelian seal, a lot of fabric, like a lot of mat pieces, a lot of seeds. We keep all the seeds because those can be used for carbon dating, and bone, and a lot of flint. We had a lot of pieces of flint. The arrowhead was the first, the one complete piece we could tell was an arrowhead, but the other pieces of flint are all examined by experts in the area of flint, and they can tell what they were used for. Some for cutting, some were knives, a variety of things. But 400 items that were taken out of the cave and documented.
Okay. So my next question is, now I think maybe the listening audiences might be a little confusing for them, but we have both the first Jewish revolt was start around 66 to around 70 of the Common Era.
Yep.
And then around 130 or so is the second Jewish revolt under Hadrian. People fled to the caves in both of these revolts. Can you tell whether yours is first Jewish revolt or second Jewish revolt?
No, I don't recall us finding any coins. There was a coin found, I think, in one of the other caves that was excavated, but I don't recall us finding, if memory serves me, we found any coins to help dating. But the pottery was a typical first century Qumran pottery style. And the mats and the linen can be carbon dated, and I haven't received any reports back on that yet, but they can carbon date that and pinpoint that particular first or second revolt on that, Bar Kokhba.
Actually, it's quite an adventure. You got 24 people, and one of them was John Denver, And then you had, yeah, your Palestinian friend whose relatives go back to the original Dead Sea Scroll findings. And then towards the end of the excavation, he whispers to you, I think we were here.
Yeah.
Just before.
The other important point is that we have Jewish scholars and
Okay.
Palestinian people working side by side on our excavation.
That's a good point to make, even with everything going on right now. Not everybody is like at each other's
Well,
throats.
the other point is that we stayed at a kibbutz in near Qumran. That's where all the team stayed. But for the grace of God,
It's always
it
good
could have
to
been
share
us.
the adventure, to share the glory, and it creates income for the locals as well. It's just a good way of doing business and creating friendships overseas. But what an adventure to go in. Once again, folks, the first ones to make a comment, all right, and also give us information on how to reach you. I will send you one of these books. They're both identical. Digging Up the Bible by Dr. Graves. I'll tell you what, thanks for your time. I really appreciate some of this, the inside of what goes into an excavation, the people that you meet, the fun that you can have, and sometimes the unknown, the mystery, if you will, of a academic hunt with permits. Thank you, Dr. Graves. I appreciate this.
You're welcome. Really appreciate it. Thanks, George.